Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Host Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Trinidad and Tobago's opposition leader says they are ready to support fight against crime. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Friday, 15th September 2023, brought to you in association with our friends at Antillean Group. Details when we return.
Believe in our strength, we'll stand by you. Protection from all perils, big and small. Reassurance we give, it's so clear to see. Peace of mind, that's our service guarantee. We look after all our family. Yes, we do at every opportunity.
Antillean Group, underwriters of all classes of insurance solutions for your protection and investment. Live well financially.
Welcome back. In light of criticism for an alleged lack of support in the fight against crime, the opposition commits itself as ready and willing. Trinidad's opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar issued a statement on Tuesday on the UNC's position. TV6's Urvashi Tarari Rupnarayan reports.
Monday's opening of Parliament, where she called for greater collaboration as it relates to legislative measures against crime. The Prime Minister, when questioned by TV6, said he would be surprised if any different approach is taken. The opposition United National Congress says it stands ready and willing to support the government in the fight against crime. Kamla Persad-Bissessar issued a statement on Tuesday afternoon after being subject to criticism from government quarters. Following President Christine Kangalu's speech at Monday's opening of Parliament, where she called for greater collaboration as it relates to legislative measures against crime, the Prime Minister, when questioned by TV6, said he would be surprised if any different approach is taken by his parliamentary colleagues. The opposition leader says, quote, the Rowley government cannot continue complaining about needing support in the fight against crime while simultaneously refusing the help of the UNC, civil society, and other stakeholders, end quote. She says her party has always placed the interest of Trinidad and Tobago first by collaboration, consultation, and bipartisan efforts with the government. But the opposition leader says proposals sent to the Rowley government have not been given consideration. She says in 2023, the UNC asked the Prime Minister to meet to discuss assisting government with further anti-crime measures, but that was refused. She says, quote, this has not reduced our willingness to collaborate on crime fighting, as we have supported the government on countless crime fighting bills. Today, we once again stand ready and willing. She listed 17 anti-crime bills supported by her party since 2015 and 6 special majority bills which were passed with opposition support. In saying the people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve to live in a safe and secure environment and not in a state of constant fear and uncertainty, Persad-Bissessar says the government could not continue making excuses about needing the UNC's support when they continue to refuse the help offered. Urvashi Tarari Rupnarayan, TV6 News.
In the meantime, as President Christine Kangalu urged parliamentarians to fix crime by coming together, some criminologists and political analysts believe that the call for unity is not realistic. However, there's a piece of legislation they believe must be taken seriously by both sides of the House in order to make a real dent on crime in Trinidad and Tobago. CNC3's K. Marie Fletcher explains.
While President Christine Kangalu's inaugural speech to both houses on Monday left many feeling hopeful, her clarion call for parliamentarians to work together on legislation and other measures to combat crime fell on deaf ears to some analysts. Responding to her plea, some criminologists and political analysts say that ideology of unity is simply wishful thinking. Political analyst Professor Hamid Ghani tells CNC3 News that the president's call goes against the grain of what the country's constitution requires.
One area that she went, which perhaps appears somewhat unrealistic, is to make this call for compromise and collaboration. On the issue of crime, the government and the opposition are miles apart from each other. So I'm not very hopeful that we're going to see much collaboration. The opposition has adopted a position that it wants to introduce stand your ground legislation, and the government is fiercely opposed to the concept of stand your ground legislation.
Similarly, criminologist Professor Ramesh Deusaran said this call is not new. Instead, he believes the president should have used the opportunity to publicly invite the government and opposition to meet to discuss crime plans. This, as he notes, the opposition will not support a crime plan it does not agree with. However, criminologist Dr. Randy C. Prasad believes that there should be some compromise. He said laws such as the Bail Act and Anti-Gang Act should be at the top of the priority list of policymakers to combat crime.
Because legislation is an important part, of the fight against crime, and if we cannot move expeditiously when it comes to passing legislation, and we cannot agree on legislation, the criminals will always have the upper hand. What really is required here is working together so that you could create the systems that would actually allow the bill to function as it is supposed to function.
Though they were not moved by her call for unity, the criminologist did agree with one recommendation by Kangaloo for a public bills committee to be implemented. K. Fletcher, CNC3 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick, in association with our friends at
Antillean Group, underwriters of all classes of insurance solutions for your protection and investment. Live well financially.
The Road to Independence for St. Kitts and Nevis, as presented by the Right Excellent Right Honourable Sir Kennedy Simmons, provided significant insight into the political and social challenges that shaped the pathway toward the 1983 independence of St. Kitts and Nevis. Glenn Bart of SKN Newsline reports.
A pre-40th anniversary independence event organized by the People's Action Movement. It was promoted as a conversation with our first Prime Minister, held 11th September and attended by members of the St. Kitts and Nevis Diplomatic Corps. The first Prime Minister, who is also a designated national hero, not only laid out the historical journey to independence, but highlighted several achievements of his administration in the early years of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and spoke of the need for action on existing challenges.
It is safe to say that our 40 years of independence has been successful when measured by a variety of criteria, including economic, cultural, educational, and the field of sports, with such icons as Kim Collins, Elkomeda Willett, Keith Atherton, Derek Parry, Atiba Harris. There are so many others too numerous to mention in a variety of fields of endeavor. But we cannot sit on our laurels, because the challenges that lie ahead are even greater than those we have overcome. And some of those that we have overcome are close to recurring. Our CBI is under attack, and we need to mount a major diplomatic offensive to preserve it in a form that is beneficial to us. Diplomacy is the vehicle used in international circles to invite, cultivate, and strengthen relationships in order to promote a country's self-interest. Before independence, our colonial masters retained for themselves control of our external relations in their self-interest.
His presentation was viewed by local, regional, and international audiences. Glenn Bart reporting for SK Newsline.
Bahamian Prime Minister Davis wants the United States to revisit climate change position. Carla Palmer of ZNS News filed this story.
Prime Minister the Honorable Philip Davis says, as the first world leader of nations in the Western Hemisphere, the United States and its position on issues impacting the global community is regarded significant, primarily for small island developing countries like the Bahamas.
It's expected that they continue to lead, but lead in a way that is sensitive to our needs and that is responsive to our needs. And so, for example, I would wish to call upon them to revisit the statement that was made by John Kerry, where they are declining to consider assisting smaller and developing states in respect to some loss and damage, particularly for those over the last several years, which is burdening most of our smaller and developing states with the debt incurred as a result of recovery efforts following a hurricane.
The Prime Minister's request of the U.S. review made in Chicago this past Monday during a meeting with the business community and comes ahead of a major climate change conference, COP28 in Dubai in November.
I'm hoping that they could revisit that question and we could firmly address it and come out with concrete outcomes.
Back on June 30th this year, Prime Minister Davis relinquished his position as chairman of the Caribbean Community and Common Market CARICOM, where he received unwavering support of leaders from member countries.
The more alliances that are formed around the issues that are common to all of us, the better chances we have of succeeding in having what I call successful outcomes. I know the declaration that came out of the African Union's meeting in what they call their pre-COP meeting to enable them to go with one voice, not dissimilar to what we did last August when we called all the Caribbean leaders together and we went to COP with one voice and was able to make a difference in respect to loss and damage debate.
Prime Minister Davis, regional leaders throughout the Caribbean are expected to meet in Grenada at the end of this month to craft a declaration with a unified voice on the issue before COP28. For the Bahamas Tonight, I'm Carla Palmer.
And now for a brief HGP regional roundup with Tiana Cole.
The Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority, AAIA, has launched a probe into the crash of a U.S. registered Piper PA-32 7-seater. That police said crash landed in bushes near Spring City, south of the airport in Abaco. The AAIA said the crash occurred shortly after the plane at 4:10 p.m., with 5 people on board, including the pilot, took off from the Leonard Thompson International Airport in Marsh Harbor. Media reports said a number of local residents tried to reach the site to assist, but were hindered by rain. 4 passengers were on board as well as the pilot, and no one was injured. And now for some international news. Many survivors of Morocco's earthquake were struggling in makeshift shelters on Tuesday after a fortnight outside, while villagers in devastated mountain areas voiced frustration at having received no help from the authorities. The death toll from the 6.8 magnitude quake that struck in the high Atlas Mountains late on Friday rose to 2,901, while the number of people injured more than doubled to 5,530, state television reported. It was Morocco's deadliest earthquake since 1960, and it's the most powerful in more than a century. I am Tiana Cole.
I am Eddie Frederick, wishing you a restful weekend. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean.
In the meantime, please follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily regional news and more, in association with our friends at Antillian Group.
Believe in our strength, we'll stand by you. Protection from all perils, big and small. Reassurance we give, it's so glad to see. Peace of mind, that's our service guarantee. We look after all our family. Yes, we do at every opportunity.
Antillian Group, underwriters of all classes of insurance solutions for your protection and investment. Live well financially.